Hello, we're live. Happy Friday. We're back. We're back after a week hiatus for spring break, which has left us with a lot to talk about. So, welcome.
Yeah, I was thinking like before we got on, I was like, I don't think a lot happened in the past week. And then I was like just looking at some of my stuff I shared on stories and just thinking more about what happened in the last few days. I'm like, oh, there's plenty of stuff to talk about, as always.
Yeah. As always,
Unfortunately, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have any news to talk about and we just could live a peaceful life for a
it
week?
was like our previous 4 years. It was so nice. We didn't have to
Yes.
think about these things on a daily basis and think about like stocking up on groceries, preparing for shortages,
Right.
price
Yeah.
increases, and having watching like a moronic dictator wannabe run our country.
Yeah, like, should we, like, somebody was asking me the other day, like, their friends were telling them to go to the grocery store, and I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, I forgot. Like, what are we going to have a run on our stores like we did in COVID again?
Yeah. So,
One more.
well, maybe even worse because who knows, I mean, the tariffs are pretty those will be around for a while, it seems like. I made a big Sam's order, just like, I don't know, I found a thread of like uh recommended things to stock up on, that have a long shelf life. So, I just told my husband, I'm like, "We're gonna have to make room in our pantry." We ordered a new shelf. Uh, but
Stock up. Yeah, I just heard like they interviewed the California port manager guy who said like they're expecting 30% drop uh for sure. That's like already on the books. And there was a trucking company out of Texas that just folded this morning because again, they don't have a lot of shipments coming, then
yes.
truckers are going to be out of work.
I mean, I can't believe I have to laugh because I sound like a doomsdayer, but this is coming. This is real. I was just polling my audience, like how many of you are stocking up and preparing, and how many of you are not realizing this is happening because it is. It is happening. Um, so it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like this gaslight nation. It's like we constantly have to ask ourselves. I find myself asking myself every single day, like, am I over thinking this? And it's like this constant gaslighting makes us wonder if we're crazy or not. And then
And
we have to look at the facts and realize that we're not every single day.
yeah,
It really puts a lot of weight on our minds, and I think that's where a lot of the anxiety and depression is coming from that a lot of people are facing right
I know for me, mine is the back and forth of it, of like my normalcy bias trying really hard to tell me that everything is gonna be okay. This is just a blip, like, and then the reality, having a brain and seeing the writing on the wall and analyzing all of this stuff kicks in and is like, no, you're not doing enough. Like we've got to prepare more. And it's that back and forth that really wears me down mentally.
Yeah, I was listening to a good podcast last night. I think it's the Focus Group podcast, and they had Ann Applebaum on there, and they had Ann Applebaum analyzing some of these focus groups. I would recommend everybody go to it. I forgot the name. I think it's the Focus Group podcast. Um, but it just reminded me like a lot of this is done on purpose,
Mhm.
and it also the normalcy bias kicks in where we're like, well, maybe Trump will just stop all this. He accomplished his goals. Maybe he'll lift the tariffs all tomorrow and declare victory, which he does sometimes. Like he gives us enough hope sometimes to to where we're like almost having to look to him like some sort of god or something, like where we're like begging him and hoping that he's going to be a greater man. And if he ever gives us a little hope, then we're like, oh, thank you, in a way. It's like this weird mind tricks that happens. And all of this, Anne Applebaum is one of the foremost experts on authoritarians throughout history. And they were asking her in the podcast, to talk about some of these things, and she was basically saying like, yes, all this is, it may not get as bad as a lot of uh, things that have happened in the past throughout history, but all of this is in line with past authoritarians, and it's just um, it's scary. But we didn't really think about like these sort of some things they don't teach you in the history books around this mass psychology that happens. This half a population, or not half, it's really about 30 to 35% of our population like lives in an entire fantasy world,
Mm,
different from ours. That's not something they taught in the history books. And to experience it is very disorienting
mhm,
for us to go through on a daily basis.
mhm. Yeah. I know for me, and I was talking to another advisor earlier. One of the things we brought up is, like, the aspect of, like, when is enough gonna be enough, right? 'Cause that's also a strategy of, like, how he's going really fast, but at the same time, like, it's almost in slow motion too, so that as things are happening, like, the normalcy bias is kicking in, and you're just living in this state of, like, constant drama, constant shock and awe, and so it starts to numb everything down, and we were talking about, like, for me, the shocking part and, again, the part that's hard to process is, like, as we're starting to see ICE detain and brutally harass actual American citizens and have no repercussions, like, that's alarming to me, right? And maybe I'm just hyper aware because I have an immigrant husband, but to me, what that is saying is they can target whoever they want, and I think Pam Bondi just released a memo saying, yes, they can, they can, detain whoever they want. There's not gonna be any repercussion, basically. Now, I know a memo is a memo, but still, like, that's saying, like, for this family, and I think they had just moved to, um, where did Oklahoma, and her daughters were there, and ICE literally broke into her house. They made them, like, change and strip. Apparently, one of the underage girls was, like, in her underwear outside. It was raining. I mean, like, brutally inhumane treatment, took all their money, and then, like, no like, what happens? And, like, also, where's the outrage for that? At what is it gonna have to happen to somebody that we know? Because the numbing effect is so strong. I'm like, it's going from, like, point A to B to C to D to D, and it's like, they're now doing this to citizens, clearly. So where's the point where even, like, conservatives or MAGA start to say, "Well, that's not right," and from "That's not right" to "I have to do something about it." It's
Well, the problem is, and what I saw in this focus group podcast, is I listen to that all the time. It's hard to listen to because they mostly interview Biden to Trump voters, or just Trump voters they're focusing on, or independents. They don't they don't interview everybody, but a lot of it is this the media bubbles. Like, you have like Fox News and some of these other ones. They're not even covering that. They're
Right.
literally saying MS-13. They just repeat it over and over again. So people say, well, yeah, I've heard different things, but it sounds like it's just an immigrant, um, which don't care about it as much as a citizen. Um, but we don't really know what the truth is anymore. Both sides are wrong. There is no truth. We don't know what the truth is, and that's the thing that's on
Yeah.
purpose. And that's why they have these little situations where it's hard for our news coverage, because again, we're flooded with so much news. What you just described, I mean, they're not even hearing that.
Yeah.
And if they
It
do hear it, it's altered, or just a flat out lie. And so
yeah.
even though people are smart, people understand that, hey, this could be a lie if I listen to it on Fox News. But what if it's the truth too? They think both sides are doing it. They
Yeah.
somehow think, CNN or whatever is reporting it wrong too. That there's
Yes.
not much truth to what you
It's
just said.
complete distrust in traditional media, which is what they set out to do. I mean, Trump started saying fake news in 2016. That was one of Andreas's first red flags during the the debates is he started using that term fake news. He said, that's what Chavez, he was like sounding the alarm for me, to me. It was our wedding year, 2016. And I was, I did the thing. I was like, that can't happen here. And he said,
Yeah,
most,
he stole that from us. A lot of what, because if you remember, normal media and stuff like that, and people and independents and liberals started calling out the fake news, and he stole it from us to where he just started attacking us and that, just overwhelming
Mhm.
us, and kind of made up a lie that there is no truth. And it's confusing to people, and it causes people on purpose to check out. Like all both sides are the same. There
Mhm.
is not really a truth. We
Both
don't
sides.
really know.
Mhm.
They attacked Trump, so he's getting a little bit of repercussion back, which is normal because they overly attacked him in the first place. So, politics just sucks. We just didn't hear about this stuff before. That was literally their answers in these focus groups, and that's on purpose.
Mhm. And you brought up MS-16. Did I say that right?
13.
13. Okay, we have to talk about this
Yeah.
interview. The the beauty of what we got this week with the first 100 days is that we got to see a little more than usual his moron on display, and the total ring kissing that even what's her name? Ugh, she's awful. What's her name? The blonde right wing, and anyway.
You talking about the press, that
No,
you're talking about?
she's like a talking head, extreme right wing, but she said she's the one who said, "Can we please stop with the Kim Jong Un like roundtables?"
Oh, Ann Coulter.
Ann Coulter. It's like you even upset Ann Coulter. It was so bad. But this
Yeah.
interview where uh Terry Moran is like, no, that was photo. I never really can. I gotta admit something. It wasn't until I watched like the Daily Show did the best booth and breakdowns of both of the interviews, both of like the one-to-one interview and then when Terry's in the White House asking about the Declaration of Independence. So you have to go check those out. But I didn't understand the Photoshop thing until I watched that video because I was like, I saw the picture of his tattoos and then the letters, MS-13, and I immediately realized that that's just like a labeling. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what was photoshopped? I was confused. I'm like, are those his actual tattoos? Is that the actual photo representation of, I was like, I need to like look into this. I never did. And then when I went in his interview and realized he thought the labeling of MS-13 was actually tattooed on his hand, and my mind exploded. I thought,
Yeah, you tell like you really thought that, which is kind of hard to believe. I think most people sees that, and yeah, you can see how the Photoshop doesn't layer up right with the skin and curve around it. I mean, it was obvious that they were just pointing to the Carolina leaf as like representing an M,
yeah,
you know? Um,
because when I hear the word Photoshop, I thought, "Oh, they, like, made those symbols, like the leaf and the skull, they messed with those." No, that's not
no.
that's not what it was.
Yeah, yeah, and that just tells me that like Steve Miller and them are likely just saying like, look, he is MS-13 or what. I don't know what's going on in those conversations, but what's scary is like he's listening to Steve Miller more,
We
in
talked
some
about
of
this
those
a
people.
couple weeks ago, like, I really think Stephen Miller is the puppeteer. Like, I think he's running a lot of like, I think he's feeding Trump what he wants Trump to actually believe because Trump d
And what he wants to
yeah, what he wants to hear, but also through the lens of what Stephen Miller wants to push. It's getting skewed by Stephen Miller's delivering all this to Trump, and he's delivering it however he wants to, even if he wants. Now, that's self-serving for Trump too, because ultimately he gets to blame somebody else and say, "Well, my
hear. Yeah.
team,
He
fed into
loves,
me."
yeah. I notice when he puts certain people out to cover like problems and controversies, you can tell he's setting them up to be a fall guy.
Mhm.
Like and like to where they can take the blame if it blows up too much.
Yes. So that way he's, like, protected, but I do think Stephen Miller is calling most of the shots and making Trump believe a certain way, and that
Yeah,
doesn't
especially in
excuse
immigration. Yeah,
that does not excuse Trump in any way, shape, or form.
yeah,
I think Trump is a moron, and ultimately, and can we talk about also that point when they were talking about the tattoos, how he says, "Well, just why don't you just say yes? Why don't you just say yes?
yeah.
You see MS-13, he's never, and you can tell he's
Why
been
can't
at
you
those
just agree with me?
every day.
Tell all your people that.
He's at those round tables, and they're just kissing his ass and praising him, telling him what he wants to hear. And so anytime he gets in front of the media and they, like, pressure him on something or counter him on something, he can't handle it. He just is like, "No, you have to agree with me."
Yeah, he wants Terry Moran at ABC News to be like the people at the round table, the cabinet round table, to just say like, "You're the greatest ever." Like, why can't you just say that, Terry Moran?
I have to read what George here just wrote. He goes, "Everyone knows MS-13 uses Comic Sans for their hand tats, not Times New Roman." Duh. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Um,
great point.
but
Yeah,
also this point when they he's in the Oval Office and Terry asks him about what the Declaration of Independence means to him.
oh god.
And
Yeah, the Daily Show did a great snippet
it's
on this on
just
Instagram.
mind-boggling how dumb. And so I'm
Yeah,
watching
what did he say?
he go and
Terry
Terry
Moran
goes, "So
goes, "What does that mean to you?"
what does it mean to you?" He goes, "Well, you know, it means unity and love and peace," or something like that. Not independence, just
Yeah.
unity and love. 'Cause he has no vocabulary. He doesn't know how to have, like, an intellectual, like, even not intellectual, like a baseline conversation. He doesn't know how to talk about things on a normal level of intellect basis. And so Andreas and I, my husband, were watching these videos together. You know, Andreas is from Venezuela, and he made a very valid point. He said, because I'm, like, saying to Andreas, I'm like, I can't wrap my head around how stupid he is. Like, how do we watch this and, like, even when they had the panel with, O'Reilly and the guy who's a black conservative, he's talking head, and he starts asking him about Harvard, and Trump starts talking about Harlem and black people. And I'm like, I cannot wrap my head in the stupidity. Like, I just can't. Like, I'm in a Black Mirror episode, and how funny that they just have to sit there and take it. They have to just, like, take the stupidity with, like, a bullet and digest it and make him seem like he's not that stupid. It's mind-blowing to me. And so Andreas goes, he goes, "Chavez was not that stupid." He goes, "It's is even incredible for him because he's like, at least Chavez had, like, some intellect. Like, he could go tit for tat in conversations and be able to hold, like, an intellectual conversation on top of being charismatic and persuasive and evil." So I was just like, "Yeah, how are we all just sitting around watching this pretending like this is normal?"
Yeah, that you saying that reminds me of, something Trump posted the other day, justifying all his tariffs and everything. He said a quote that, like, a lot of rich people say, like, and it's been on Game of Thrones and stuff as, like, "He who controls the gold controls the world," or whatever. So I was thinking, like, Trump actually thinks, like, this tariffs and undermining our financial system and the global financial system, like, brings more gold to us, and I was like, "That makes sense," because, again, it's the stupidity that he's been stuck with this whole thing, like, he's misunderstood the global financial system since, I think, the '80s. He was complaining about Japan taking advantage of us
Because he's
and stuff like that, like, he's literally that's why he's sticking with this, it's like his one
economically
true religion.
illiterate.
Yeah, and then just listening to all these great economists, we can talk about my Substack I wrote recently. Gillian Tedd on Ezra Klein and the compound with I forgot her name, another economist, talking about some of the really big problems with the dollar and everything. I think Ezra Klein just came out with a new podcast on the dollar, so I've been uh, thinking about my experience because I've read so much about this for a long time, and like there's so many things that he's destroying with our global power, like our global power over the financial system and the U.S. dollar as a the reserve currency of the world. He's undermining that. So he's literally like we have all the gold and control the world as it is, and he's breaking it on purpose. But in his mind, he thinks that we are poor, I guess, already, and everybody's taking advantage of us.
Yes,
So he thinks this is going to bring us more gold, I think.
he, he thinks we've been at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously, we've had, and it's that idea that Ezra and Jillian talked about is the stick versus the carrot, and the strength that comes with the carrot and what actually using the stick means. It's that same analogy of like, we do have advantages. I was just listening to Ezra's latest episode on the dollar, and he had an expert on. The main advantage has been us having lower interest rates all around.
Yeah.
Um, and
And I can give a little explainer for everybody too, if
yeah,
but I'll let you finish your thought.
well, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, this episode starts to dissect of like trying to figure out the why behind understanding why Trump that, and it's a complete misunderstanding because he thinks everyone has been taking advantage of us and that we've been at a disadvantage when clearly it's the opposite.
Yeah, and somebody asked if I'll be running for state or federal office. I will one day. We're working on it. Uh, we got a lot of work to do in the meantime because next time I run, I definitely want to make sure and win this sucker and really help our state and nation if I can help it. But just kind of giving a primer on the dollar and the reserve currency because a lot of people hear it, and it always took a lot of time for me to understand this throughout the years. Um, but we have to the US dollar is the most important thing in the world. It's used for all trade. And if you think about it, like all of the different countries around the world, 150 countries, all have different currencies. Okay, so if if Korea, for instance, South Korea wants to trade with Germany, well, Germany doesn't need Korean dollars. Like, what are they going to do with Korean dollars? So and vice versa. Korea doesn't need German dollars. So what they do is they trade with us so they can get dollars. Okay, so they sell us stuff so they can have dollars that they can use to trade with other countries because all countries accept U.S. dollars. So Korea will sell to us. We'll give them dollars, and it has to be a trade deficit in order for them to get the dollars. Okay,
Mhm.
so that facilitates those trade deficits is not a bad thing. The word deficit sounds bad, and I think that's why Trump thinks that it's bad because he uses the word deficit.
Well,
But
it's the
you can
same
say it's
reason why Venezuelans come here to seek asylum, and he's saying that they're coming from insane asylums. It's the same
exactly.
logic.
Yeah. Yeah. So trade deficit is not a bad thing with us. It facilitates global trade. So they need a trade deficit with us so they can have a surplus of dollars in their country. So then they could use that to buy things from Germany. And Germany does the same thing with us so they can use our dollars to trade with Korea. So it facilitates trade. And then countries like China and India they need a lot of dollars because they do a lot of trade. So what they do is they park those dollars in our U.S. Treasury T-bills, okay, and we give them an interest. So we're basically a savings account for China and all these other big countries, Germany and stuff like that. They buy our bonds because it's like a savings account, and they can get a little bit of interest on it. That's the reason. So when people say like they own us, they own all our debt and they could dump it. No, that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it as a benefit because they know we're the safest asset in the world, that the dollar is the safest, that we have the rule of law, okay, and we have deep financial systems, so they know they'll get their money back with
Mhm.
interest. That is them giving us the ultimate confidence in the world. Okay, that's what gives us our power. Okay, so whenever they buy our bonds, that brings interest rates lower. Okay, because there's a high demand for our dollars and our T bills. When there's a high demand, that means we have to pay less interest. If there was no demand for our bonds and stuff, then we would have to like raise our interest rates to pay them more. But
And
it's a benefit to us to keep our interest rates low, which means it's easier for you to buy a car. It's easier for you to buy a lower interest rate on a mortgage. Like we've been benefiting in this. Our economy has been benefiting from the dollar for decades. I mean, the last 80 years.
I was going to make a point. It's not just lower interest rates for the US government. That gets passed on to you and I in the form of mortgage rates, auto loans, that's the Fed. That's our everyone gets to benefit from that.
And another thing that they was brought up on that Ezra Klein podcast today, which I was thinking, because we kind of lose track of these things. Even people like us that are in the financial services industry that like understand economics, even we have to kind of refresh our mind with this because we're not like trading currencies on the global stage. We're helping people with their investments. But he also mentioned the Federal Reserve independence, how important that is, because
Mhm.
all presidents want low interest rates because it boosts financial when interest rates are low, makes it easier for people to borrow. If it's artificially low, it booms the economy. Okay, it makes things better and boosts financial assets. But the problem with it is that also creates inflation because it creates a high demand, and if we can't meet that demand, then prices go up. So it inflates our assets. Well, if you undermine the Federal Reserve's independence and they artificially cut rates before too early, that increases inflation. Well, it hurts us and it hurts all the other countries around the world too.
Mhm.
Because that means that we're inflating our assets and devaluing their savings. Because remember they have dollars on hand and they bought bonds with us. It devalues all their savings. So if they know that we took away that Federal Reserve independence and Trump had control over it and artificial and cut rates too soon, that undermines all their money and it's scaring the hell out of them. So what happens is now a lot of these countries, because they're scared of Trump, and this is why I say the damage is probably going to be unable to be undone in the near future because Trump is going to be there and they know that they're afraid to buy our bonds, okay? And so they may not be selling them right now, okay, because that would undermine their own assets and devalue because they have so much of our assets. But it means that they're not going to be buying as much, and they're going to be diversifying. So they're going to probably be buying German bonds more now. They're probably Chinese bonds. Other safe countries are going to be
Thank you.
buying more of the assets, and it's going to make our dollar drop in value,
Mhm.
uh, which is fine and normal. Dollar goes up and down, but to artificially push it low and for it to never this could be a long-term thing. It could really undermine our power in the world completely and have people turn to other assets and look for another currency besides us, which means we could lose control. So we can't do economic sanctions and stuff like that. Like we've
Yeah.
used economic sanctions on other countries for decades, and that has prevented a lot of hot wars. So if we don't have that power anymore, you're probably going to see more wars started in the coming decades. So this has a chain reaction that could last decades, and it's not good.
And that's just a play out of what could happen on the global scale if the Fed loses independence. Um, for US citizens, that also means if you artificially lower interest rates, like you said, and inflation goes up even higher, and we saw that happen with COVID, where inflation was rising at a rapid pace, but we were also recovering in the economy. Uh, Jobs and companies were producing, um, having good earnings reports, all those things. But if you artificially lower it and the underlying economy is not strong enough to manage that soft landing, which is what the Biden administration was doing, um, then then you have to look beyond recession. You have to look, that's what happened. That's what led to the Great Depression. Then you're getting into depression terms if it could lead to stagflation.
Yeah, and that's another point too. You mentioned like public investment is an important thing too. So one of the things with the Inflation Reduction Act that Biden and Democrats know, is to help bring, because one of the problems with COVID is um, inflation was happening is because all the supply chains were messed up. Like we didn't have supply. Okay, so prices were going up, which is about to happen again now. So if
Mhm.
you don't have supply, you have to invest in building more supply. So you invest a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act was like, hey, we're going to invest public money into into new industries. We're going to put money in people's pockets more with the child tax credit. There's a lot of things that you do to make sure and increase supply. And the problem with Republicans and GOP and Trump in general is they have no interest in building our supply at all. And that could lead to runaway inflation in the coming years.
Yep.
And that happened again in the Great Depression too, with World War II. And we were building things. We were investing public money and tax money and things like that, and printing dollars to invest back into American industries and building planes. We created Social Security. We created Medicare. All these things that we were building and putting money in people's pockets and building new industries and things like that. We're not even planning to do that right now.
And all of this backs up, what your recent article about the financial advice industry is so relevant, especially to anyone listening who has a current advisor. Which is the point to say is this is not business as usual. Things are happening on a global scale right now, and even though we haven't felt the first tremor, it's kind of like a tsunami when the earthquake happens, you have this time in between where you think everything's fine and stuff, and then the tsunami comes out of nowhere. And that's kind of like what people in the financial industry need to be planning for. But everyone's acting like this is just your normal run of the mill potential recession. And we as advisors are saying, no, it's way beyond that. The repercussions are going to be more longer term, and 9 out of 10 scenarios, this is gonna go bad. And I
Yeah,
hate to be a doomsday I hate to be a doomsayer, but there's no way around it. You can't just ignore the facts. You can't just cherry pick the information that you want to.
yeah, so if everybody I just put that Substack out yesterday that the financial services industry is not ready for this moment. And I kinda one of the endings to it, I say, like, dare I say this time is different. Because it's been a, like, saying in our financial advisor industry. I forgot who, I forgot who the quote came from. Uh, he quoted it, I think in the 70s that, anytime somebody says this time is different, it's like you're being made fun of. Like everything is always the same, markets always go up and down, stuff like that. And that's been what it's been like over the past 80 years since we've had the New World Economic Order that was created at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire after World War II. They created the New World Economic Order. And things most of the time have been that way. And, there hasn't been things that are too different. But I think now, 80 years later, um, we are entering into a new world economic order, whether we like it or not. Things maybe were set up. The table was set even before Trump came along, and he's pushing us over the cliff. And I think that now we have to say, hey, this time could be different. And I think people know that. So when we talk
Mhm.
about financial advisors, and we're getting such an influx of new potential clients coming to us because they're saying, and these are people all over the nation, they're saying, like, "I'm talking to my financial advisor, and he's telling me the same thing he's always told me, and I just know in my mind that something is different this time." We're potentially under a dictatorship, and the Axios uh, poll just came out. 52% of Americans think that Trump is a dangerous dictator. So it's not just a very small amount of people. We're not crazy. So when you go to your financial advisor and they say, "Oh, just buy the dip, things will be fine." Well, a lot of these things, the undermining of the dollar and the global financial system, all of that, it doesn't mean it's just going to be fine. And you have to have an advisor that understands that. And I think our financial media is not ready for financial media a little bit more so, but like our financial institutions, all the economists that are hired for Chase, JP Morgan, um, Morgan Stanley, all the big financial firms, they have their own in-house economists, and they've been non-biased, nonpartisan. It's like on purpose for the last number of decades. When you write an economic article, it's got to be article has got to be completely nonpartisan, but it's completely missing the mark because I realized in when I first started 21 years ago in 2004 that, or actually in 2008 with the financial crisis, that politics and economics are completely linked, and has been even more so every year since then, and to where we are today. So when you ignore um, uh, Trump and all of this in your economic forecasts, you're doing yourselves a big disservice, and you're hurting the people that you're supposed to represent in their financial situations. And just an example is when they write articles, they say tariff-related uncertainty. Tariff-related uncertainty is Trump-related uncertainty.
Uh-huh.
You have to
Yep.
say it. And it
Mhm.
made me think over the long term, like, why is it this way? And I really think that we were trained culturally, through school. We all took economics classes at LSU. Did Danielle? You and I have. Economics is about mathematics and numbers only. Um, there's no politics involved in it at all. And I said, we were trained that way, and just thinking why that is. Um, and the more I think about it, the moneyed interests and powerful people, they've been working at undermining the middle class since the late 70s. So wealth inequality has split big time over the past 50 years. Okay. And they don't want us remembering the time of the New Deal when there was government intervention, like how important it is for government intervention in the economy that got us out of the Great Depression, that helped us get through World War II and creating the biggest middle class in history. All of that has been whittled away. At the same time, we're supposed to think that politics and economics need to be everything needs to be nonpartisan. I think we're in for a rude awakening. I'm glad that we are understanding that and helping our clients at least talk about it. Um, but there's going to be a big reckoning in the financial industry.
And that brings up a good point to, I think, what a lot of people are realizing, going back to the 70s and the 80s with Reagan, is that a lot of his policies are why we're in a lot of situations we're in now, mainly around like wealth inequality. And so that's like what I want to say to anyone who's thinking, okay, well, Trump's just going to be here for 4 more years and then we're going to move on. Well, first of all, he's not going to leave. He's going to have to be kicked out if that even happens. And you can see just by looking at the what happened with Reagan's policies, how we're going to be dealing with this and undoing this for decades to come. Decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Once we get past this, because, yeah, like I mean, tax rates used to be above 90% in the top income tax brackets. They've been whittling that away since Reagan, deregulating, basically taking away power of the people, diminishing the power of people, and everything's been funneled to the few and the big corporations. Um, and even public college used to be uh, uh, happening in a lot of states, and Reagan killed that because he was worried about. And we know this from a lot of his recordings and stuff like that. That he was worried about an educated proletariat. So that's why we don't have public college, like we have public high school and elementary school. Um, so yeah, I mean, all of that is coming to bite us right now. I think this whole Trumpism, when I say set the table was set, yeah, it was set since the 70s and the 80s, and that's what we're facing now. And we're likely after a big disaster, probably going to have to enter into some new deal to get out of it.
Mhm.
I just hope that the disaster that takes place in the coming years isn't as bad as the Great Depression, World War II, like it was for the previous generations.
Same. I mean, I think that's what we're all hoping for. I still feel again, I fluctuate between having hope that I don't know, can we impeach him? But and then I'm like, well, no, that would need to happen like immediately, and I just don't see that happening. So it's like what little hope I have quickly gets burnt out.
I think it's important to have hope, though, because the
Mhm.
moment we stop having hope is the moment that they really go through with this. Like we have a lot of systems in place that they didn't have in past generations. A lot of institutions still are working. You know, the Supreme Court, for instance, when they were doing these focus groups, when you brought up the Supreme Court, um, voted 9-0, which they never do, to reverse sending some of these immigrants to a gulag and stuff like that. People are like, well, you know, people still trust some of our institutions because they remember, reading about uh, some of those famous Supreme Court lawsuits that have changed America over the last 80 years throughout our history. So there is things that we have that we can hold on to. We can't give up hope. We have to keep fighting. Uh, when we give up, they want us to. They want us to think there's no hope.
And that's when I come back to the idea that I said at the beginning is like, what is it going to be? When is enough going to be enough? And I know I'll bring this up real quick because a lot of people coming to talk to us who are really, really worried, they all bring up the FDIC and their concerns of the dismantling of the FDIC. And I'll just go ahead and reiterate it here is that we still believe in the strength and the solid base of the FDIC. I mean, it's literally what got us out of the Great Depression and prevented that from happening ever since. And it requires the buy-in. It requires all of us to buy in and trust. And one the most I think uh, influential or convincing part of this argument that I'm about to say, Dustin, I think you said it is um, if they go after it, I think it would be so widely unpopular that I feel like that's one of the things that would be the hard stop, the hard, like, hell to the no, you're not coming for that. And unfortunately, with a lot of these issues, it is going to have to come to it where they like the coming for the Social Security and the Medicaid. It's almost like, okay, you have to let them go there. You have to let them go there and physically try to remove it and pull it back. And then hopefully there will be a strong response to that from the
Yeah,
people.
which we do have to step up and help give that strong response.
So, what else?
Well, we can keep talking for an hour, but an hour more. But I think this may be a good place to wrap it up. Until
Okay.
next week.
Okay. Um, if you haven't yet, go check out Dustin's article on financial advisors. I also have a new article from last week about the new economic world order and gives you some ideas. If you're looking for more customized recommendations for us, consider booking a discovery meeting with us, which I always include in the emails that I send this recording out to. So make sure you're subscribed. And y'all have a great weekend. We'll see y'all next week. We'll see what's in store. But feel free to let us know if you have any specific questions. You can send those to us at any time and we'll try to get to them.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.